Hey gang, this is Fillmore, just letting you know that if you enjoy our podcast, quite frankly, a Howard Stern podcast, and you'd like to donate some money for the upkeep, or you want to request certain clips, please donate to our Patreon page at patreon.com/JimFix. That's JIMFIXX. You can donate as much as you want for as long as you want. There's absolutely no obligation.
Ralph had one of everything, and then I would put on my underpants. And then I would
sashay out.
And then I'd parade around. And then, in order to feel more comfortable, we pretended I was at a gay club, walking around in just my underpants, and to see if everyone at the gay club enjoyed me. And when we voted on my underpants look, and that was really gay. You know, I was very gay.
It sounds gay because it was just the two of you.
Yeah. And then even Ralph said, you know, you don't need to keep parading around. Why don't you just try them on, and whatever ones you like, we can order.
Right. He doesn't need to see you.
Yeah. And I go, what's the matter? You don't want to see me?
Joe, hi. You're on the air. Hey, man.
Howard.
Yeah.
What's going on?
And nothing.
Listen, I think it's time you come out of the closet with Ralph.
Oh, please.
Because I know deep down, I mean that literally.
All right, so I'm a homosexual.
You're a sword swallower.
Right. I'm a homosexual. You're right.
Thanks, Howard.
Right. What can I tell you? I'm caught. Good. In fact, that's good. That would be easy. I'd love to be gay. It'd be so goddamn simple. And then when people ask me about why I'm separated from Howard, I just go, you know what? I'm gay.
20% of American men had at some time in their lives at least one homosexual experience. Now, you told me every man did.
Yeah, well, every man has, but only 20% will admit to it. It's a pretty embarrassing thing. Every guy has at least had a sword fight.
Now, wait a minute. Would you say that just because you had, and you want to believe that every man does?
I never had a sword fight.
Not a sword fight, but you had a homosexual experience.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you want to call it that. I mean, I was a young child, of course.
I think that's why you want to just label every man.
Every man has had some kind of homosexual experience.
Oh, I watch every movie.
I got to tell you, I had the same thing for a while. Like when I first started therapy, you kept asking me about like gay feel, like, you know, gay this, gay that. I go, listen, dude, let's cut that shit right now. I said, I got no problem with gay people. Dude, I'm not gay. Because, but, you know, you have to explore that side. And I go, bullshit. I'm not exploring that. I got no problem.
Yeah, what do you mean explore?
I like chicks, dude.
Hey guys, this is a little PSA about the Jackie interview before you get into it, and we hope you'll enjoy it, of course. Anybody complaining about us cutting him off, they are unfounded, because I will tell you exactly that as lovely as Jackie was, and as cordial and as congenial and generous as he was, he would go on forever with certain stories if you didn't cut him off. And we had a finite amount of time, and it was a lot of editing involved in putting this together. I think, he didn't get upset by that. He just accepted it as part of doing, you know, technological interviews through Skype or Zoom and what have you. So just part of the dinner. If I get the permission from him, I'm going to throw some of the inserts he sent us, screen caps of notes he's collected over the years. And if not, I think even still you're going to enjoy what we have to offer and what answers he's given to our questions. So enjoy. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of QF, a podcast about Howard Stern. I'm Fillmore, a.k.a. Jim Fix, a.k.a. Fillmore Fingers, and with me, of course, is Sam.
Hi, guys.
And we have a special guest for all you listeners. We've got Mr. Jackie Martling, the joke man himself, with us today. Thank you for joining us, sir.
I have no idea how you were able to get me, since I have something else to do in a couple months.
Well, I have to thank Sam for pulling this one together through her connections, and you know, we've got loads of questions. We're really interested in the minutia, and anything that sounds like a stray question or an odd question, it's all par for the course here. So, Sam, would you like to get started?
Yeah. Well, first off,
Fingers. What accent am I hearing? Fingers.
I'll give you 3 guesses.
Wait, talk a little more.
All right. Okay. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain.
It's kind of. Is it? Am I here in Philadelphia? I can't figure it out.
Further north, much further.
Canada.
Yeah, you got it. Southern Ontario.
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
But Fillmore is also Greek. Give him a little Greek, Fillmore.
Τι θέλεις να σου πω? Τι θέλεις να σου πω?
I can feel my sphincter opening.
I don't get a chance to use it on this podcast, obviously. And Sam's part Italian, part German, so she's just like she's
you
just
don't get
like
to use your sphincter on the podcast.
Not just yet. Sam, would you like to lead us off?
So, I am obsessed with the fact you were a writer on the show, and you were a part-time writer from 83 to 86, and then you became a full-time writer. Now, I've heard you talk in many interviews about how your interview style went, but I want to know what the difference was, if any, from when you were writing part-time in 83 and then when you became a head writer in 86.
I wasn't really a writer. When I went on, they first called me up to come in and sit in on the show. And at the end of the show, Howard said to me, "Man, you're a lot of fun. Why don't you come back next week?" So I came back once a week for 3 years. And he wanted a piece of business, so we started playing Stump the Comedian. And me and Fred would put together some jokes for him to call in with, because the listeners couldn't come up with a decent joke. Anything they came up with was either way too foul or way too racist. And I wrote some stuff for Howard's Helicopter Reporter, but I wasn't a writer per se. There weren't really writers on the show. But as time went on over the course of 3 years, slowly but surely, I was giving him like a line here and a line there, and it was never any kind of description as a writer. And then he got fired, then he got rehired, and I went over to K-Rock one day a week. And then in February, they called up, or whatever, at some point in 1986, Howard called me up and said, "Listen, we're going to go to mornings next week, and I want you to come in twice a week and do your thing with the notes." Because at that point, I had been on a more of a regular basis passing him notes. When he got fired and went to K-Rock, they actually had a place for me where I could sit and write, and I was within striking distance of putting a note in front of him physically. And so it was serious. And then I was there 2 days a week, and I went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 days a week within a couple of months, because truth be told, he was funnier when I was there, because, not because he's funny, but anybody with help is funnier. And not only was I there, but with me in that close proximity, Fred was able to hand me ideas too. So we became, it's not only 3 senses of humor, but 3 distinctly different senses of humor. So you never knew whether he's going to say something deep or some punchline or some ridiculous thing from Pluto. And it just got great. That's all.
Sam?
So, Jackie, I've heard you talk about this. And so I've often said, when I talk about you, I say it's a very actual, no one else could possibly do the symbiotic nature between the throw of your joke to him and the reading of your joke on air in record time, the way that happened. I think that's like a once in a lifetime thing. My question is, let
me tell you before, it's a tough call, because it's
never been done again.
Well, it had never been done, and it was kind of an absurd thing, but it wasn't like, "Hey, I got an idea, let's try this." What it was is like, if you were sitting with Fillmore and I'm sitting with you, and the 3 of us are at lunch and we're having a conversation and we're all saying funny things, but all of a sudden it's not my place to talk. So instead of saying what I'm thinking, I write it down, and Fillmore gets to say what he thinks is funny and what I think is funny. And it worked out. And the fact that Howard's so quick and so brilliant and could absorb what's in front of him, not only that quick, but sometimes he'd work his way around and come back to it. Sometimes I'd write something about Robin and he'd make it about Fred, or I'd write something about Gary and he'd switch it and make it about me. I mean, we were such a well-oiled machine. It was just really spectacular. It was really fun, Well,
you're talking to super fans, so we know that. So what I want to know is, during this period, you said it wasn't just me throwing things at him. What were the writing or creative meetings like that lent what was that like? Was there sitting in a room and everyone discussing what you guys were going to talk about? How did that go?
If you're talking about in the early, like as time went on, we did less and less bits because we put them together and they'd be so much work, and then Howard would never play them because he wouldn't shut up. We'd be like, "Hey, play the bit," play the bit. He wouldn't shut the fuck up. So, but in the beginning, it was funny. I was just telling somebody this the other day because if you guys are big fans, you would not believe the treasure trove I have, and maybe some rich guy that wants some. What we would do is we would sit in the office after the show at a desk, and me and Fred sat next to each other across from Howard, and we'd throw around ideas for like a song or a bit, and if he liked an idea, he'd say, yeah, let's do that. And then me and Fred would start tossing ideas. And as we tossed them, he would write down what he liked. And we'd say something else, and it was funny because he'd say, "Don't edit." He said to me, "Don't ever edit. I will edit." And it wound up being there was some funny things that happened on the show where he almost had a heart attack from what I wrote. Because I said, "Hey, you told me not to edit," and we'd sit there and he'd write down what we wrote until we thought we had a bit, and then we go in the back room and record it. And all those old bits, like from David Denkins and Rudy Giuliani and Al Sharpton and Teddy Kennedy, all those bits we did in 87, 88, 89, I have the scripts to all of those bits.
Wow.
And they're all in Howard's handwriting.
Wow.
Because he wrote them.
Wow.
I never wanted
in Howard's handwriting. And I have, 6 loose leaves full of these old bits. And I want to sell them to somebody before I die. Somebody told me they should be in a library or something. I said, yeah, but I'm sure he doesn't want to even know they exist.
Well,
but
that's
they do.
Just a quick question.
Those bits were so funny. They were so much fun,
Just a quick question in the interim there, between the time between 83 and 86, when he went to K-Rock, when he was at WNBC and then switched, he did a series of live shows we got a copy of one at the Ritz on 2/13/86. And so in February, I guess that's the month, or January perhaps, where he was getting paid, but still he had 2 years left of his contract, but he was still doing live gigs. Were you involved in that on any level?
The gigs at the Ritz, yeah. They were free-for-alls.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact time. I know it at some of the gigs. I know at Club Benet and maybe the Ritz, like me, Howard, and Fred and Gary did a male strip show. There's actually a picture. There's a picture in one of his books because I went to the front of the stage and bent over and turned around and bent over and spread my cheeks. There's a big picture of my ass in one of his books,
Yeah.
Whose idea was
the one
that?
with the finger, the strip show. We'd just being outrageous. We didn't know what else to do. He wasn't a stand-up, and I wasn't going to go out there and do anything. It's just like whatever happened. That's when we met Ralph. Ralph was a gas station attendant, and he showed up one night and said, "Hey, I got this great thing," and he had like a 6-foot penis that he had made. And that's how he became friends with Howard. I know that doesn't sound believable, but
no, it's true.
Know that already. You know that already.
Yep, Sam.
Yeah,
but those Ritz things, the Ritz things, I think were from when he got fired from NBC and got hired at K-Rock. I think
that's right. I'm
not sure.
I'm
not sure.
Sam.
But yeah,
Sam?
I was always, I was there. I was a part-time guy, but I was all involved. I enjoyed the whole thing.
So those live events from when he got fired from NBC and K-Rock, we actually had a fan of ours who had tapes of the Ritz shows, which are they were on cassette, and he found them in a pawn shop or antique shop. And
are you talking about the audio cassette or video cassette?
Audio.
Audio cassette.
And they're insane. I mean, he was talking about having a miscarriage on stage, and Allison was in the audience pregnant, that it was just, I don't think he knew what he was doing for the live shows. Regardless, though, you said he met Ralph during that time and he invented the penis and stuff. Now, how did Ralph... When did Ralph become a stylist, knowing that he was a parking attendant? Like, how did that happen?
No, he wasn't a parking. I think he was literally pumping gas. You know what? I don't know.
Right.
I was never privy to that. I was never privy to... I mean, Ralph kind of absorbed himself into the furniture. He kind of started working at Channel 9, I guess, picking out Howard's clothes. You know, like, because he said, yeah, you should dress more hip. Let me pick out your shirts. You know, like if I said to you, hey, can I pick out your shirt, Sam? And you say, yeah. And all of a sudden I'm your stylist. I mean,
right.
Nothing against Ralph. I mean, me and Ralph hung out a lot. We got stoned after every Channel 9 show, But how the segue of the whole thing, it's something funny because Howard used to give Gary a hard time and me a hard time because we still were friends with the people that we knew before we started getting well-known on the show. I'm like, well, these are my friends. They're still my friends. And then meanwhile, his best friend winds up being a groupie that showed up from a gas station. If it wasn't for hypocrisy, there would have been no show, But who gives a shit? I don't care. Hang out with whoever you want,
Sure. I've got a question about the Vox pilots. You've been interviewed about them, and you at some point you and Fred were in the beginning of the first pilot, the test pilots for Fox.
Well, not many people bring this up because they never aired. They, as far as most people know, they don't exist.
That's correct.
They must probably exist on the internet now. I know I got all 5 of them, but they never saw the light of day. All they were was test shows that
That's
I
right.
guess Rupert Murdoch or whoever it was said, no, that's never going on my air, And it's funny because Joe Piscopo is in the documentary about me. And I went in and sat there on his radio show with him. And he said, Jackie, I remember that channel. I remember the Channel 5 show. And I say, wow. I said, Leslie West was the band leader and Steve Rossi from Martin and Rossi.
Yep.
From Alan Rossi was the band leader. And Joe said, yeah. And I literally, years later, I mean, I'm sitting there writing notes and passing them to Howard, but on the Channel 5 show, I was physically
under the desk.
Yeah.
You already know that. I was under the desk.
We actually we found the pilots, so we did a show. A walkthrough of them, and one of the questions I had for you is, how long did you have to be under that desk?
It was funny, but I would kind of sneak under there, kind of get so the whole like it was some kind of secret, the whole thing with me writing. It's so funny because Howard always said, no, he never hid the fact. And it was just nobody's business. And to this day, there's people that have no idea I ever wrote a note for him. And I mean, show business people, I was sitting at
people know. People know it's you. Trust me.
Some people know. Not all. I was sitting there with a guy who was a producer at NBC for years, for decades. And we're watching the Subdudes, this great band. And he goes, man, I was such a fan of the Stern Show. I loved hearing you laugh. And I said, yeah, I'm glad you like that. I'm glad I made you laugh. He said, well, you laugh. I said, well, you do know I was writing a lot of the stuff he was saying. And you could have knocked him over with a feather. He said, what are you talking about? I said, I was writing in real time things for him to say. And the guy was like, kind of,
Jackie?
Not that he didn't believe me, but it was surprising to him.
It might be surprising, but I'm going to tell you, the real Stern fans know exactly when you wrote a joke. So because we can tell, first of all, when it's your writing, and second of all, it's like when you're merging, when you left and somebody else was writing for him, it was like when you're merging onto a throughway and you're like, fucking merge, because that's how awkward it was to transition from the joke, from his talking to a joke.
It was jarring.
It was like having someone having their blinker on, and you're just sitting there and you're like, fucking go. You're waiting.
That is kind of funny. You know, it was very gradual, the whole coming out bit. And there's so many stories about it. I'll tell you what, the greatest thing is, over the years, I got a lot of great compliments and left-handed compliments, and people slowly but surely finding out what's going on. And I remember this, there was a writer for the National Lampoon, and he called me up and said, let's go to lunch at the Friars Club. I want to meet you. That show's so great. I'm such a big fan. And we went out to the Friars Club to eat, and he said, you're so lucky to be part of that show. I said, well, I'm helping to write it. He goes, well, what are you doing? It's all spontaneous. And I had my notes from the day, and I put them on. I'll never forget Mark Gruber. He was a really talented writer for National Lampoon, like 1986. And I put my stack of notes, and he started leaping through the notes, and he said, this is every fucking funny thing he said today. I said, not everything, but I certainly helped. And he was shocked, but that was early on. And you're right. The really big Stern fans know. But the people, there's so many people that are, it's like the person that tunes into the Tonight Show every once in a while. They don't know Johnny as writers. They could care less that Johnny has. All they want to do is tune in and have a few laughs. So it's not something that means anything. But as far as knowing when I wrote a joke, that's very funny because everybody says the same thing. I can always tell when it was your joke because of how hard you laugh. And I've had to explain this hundreds of times.
It's more than that. Fillmore.
Yeah, you laughed. You laughed at what you thought was funny, and regardless of whether you wrote it or Fred wrote it, you laughed.
Right, that's exact. Or Howard said it by himself. I laughed.
Sure.
I tell people like Robin has the exact same laugh if somebody stubs their toe as if she would have soupy sails through a pie. It's just that.
So here's a couple questions.
I laugh as along with how funny something was. So, I would come home, my wife would say, the greatest line you wrote today was such and such. I said, I didn't write that. Fred wrote that.
Right.
She'd go, but you laugh so hard. I said, yeah, because it was so fucking funny,
Well, I have a question regarding the issue with the Fox pilots. Were you guys disappointed? First of all, you and Fred, were you disappointed that you weren't visible enough for one, except for the very first intro episode?
We were never visible ever.
Oh, that's right. Except just once, maybe your hand when you passed him the note during the Jackie Mason segment, but also. How was Howard?
I'm talking about for all time,
Oh, sure.
When we moved to the brand new studio in 94, he's like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to be in a semicircle and we're all going to be there. Next thing you know, me and Fred were behind a wall.
Right.
But we were so used to that, it came with the territory.
Okay, but fair enough. But what about the reaction after the Fox decided we're not going with this? What was Howard's? I mean, we heard on the air what he felt, but was that really? Was he glad they didn't show because he wasn't pleased with them? Or
I don't know. I have no idea what went on, what didn't go on. It was like, and everything came to us. It seeped through. He was not the kind of guy to call up and says, "Hey, guess what? They didn't take the pilot. It sucks, everybody."
But
we weren't in on it. We were part of the team.
Right.
It was like pay no attention to the scoreboard. It doesn't matter if we won the World Series or not. Just play your position and shut up. But either you take the gig or you don't, I'll tell you, me and Fred, we loved doing that show because me and Fred did the warm up and we would go out for 15 or 20 minutes before the show started. And people used to come up and say, you guys warming the audience up is the best thing that happens during the show,
Okay,
I mean, that was never on air. That was never part of anything,
Right.
Well, right. I wish that were on air because Fillmore and I often say the best thing about the show was Grandpa Al Lewis. I mean, seriously. So I know how you can sense comic talent, and you and Fred both have that ability. During the Fox pilot, you can obviously tell a lot like the roasts. He's showboating. It's overdoing it. It's not, what was the prep work like? And was there any ability to say, listen, you got to calm down?
No, we just give them whatever. Yeah, like, you really should, not overdo this. Or, no, nobody, I mean, Fred had been with him for years. Fred was with him a year before Robin. And I don't think Fred ever said, don't do this, don't do that ever.
Right.
Because he's not going to, it's no good to have advice if somebody's not going to listen to it. You're going to, and who knows? It was so hit and miss. The whole thing was so ridiculous. But that made it really, really fun. It was off the wall. And the thing is, the reason it didn't get picked up, I don't think isn't because it wasn't funny or wasn't entertaining. It just wasn't something they were going to put on their air. It wasn't like, oh, if that had been a little bit funnier. They just they didn't realize what.
But my question was going to be, what was Howard's reaction? Because he clearly wanted to get on Carson. He wanted to be. I mean, everybody wants the show to be bigger and bigger.
But you're assuming, I have no idea what was going through his head. Fred Norris has been with him since 1979.
Yes, that's true.
And I would venture big money that they have never had a conversation.
Wow.
And it's funny. I was talking to this guy today who's done a bunch of stuff, and he actually did a movie with Burt Reynolds, and he was working with Burt Reynolds just when Burt Reynolds installed his dinner theater.
Yep.
And I said, do you have any idea that Burt Reynolds is really connected to the Stern Show in the weirdest way?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what are you talking about? I said, you know what? I didn't even remember this story until me and John and Fred got interviewed for Penthouse's 20th anniversary issue.
Mm-hmm.
So they interviewed the three of us. And Fred told this. I didn't tell. Fred told this story when they interviewed him. And I read it and I was like, holy Christ, Fred, why would you remind me of that? What happened was we were sitting there on the air and Robin goes, oh, look at this, Howard. Burt Reynolds just opened up his own dinner theater. And Fred goes, yeah, in Jupiter. and only Fred knows these fucking things that nobody would know.
Yeah.
And it was Jupiter, Florida. He goes,
Florida,
Jupiter.
Yeah.
And me and Howard look at each other. And Howard looks at him and looks at me. And I said, well, the reason Fred knows that is because he himself is from Mars.
Yeah.
And that locked that in place for the next 20 years. He was the Martian. He was the alien. He was the man from Mars. We all dress up as Roman gladiators, and he was dressed as an alien. I mean, that was something, and I thought he always was mad at me for that. And meanwhile, he's telling Penthouse, But it was such a great, 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 great line,
Sam?
It is a great line. So Fred, like you said, you don't think they ever had a personal conversation, I know what you mean. But I agree with you in that sense, because he recently came out this year and he said, I was going through a separation and you didn't even know about it. And Howard was like, thank you for not telling me about it, because I wouldn't have cared. And that was how the conversation went. He said, you're welcome.
Oh, this is Fred that was going through the separation.
Yeah.
Yes. He said recently that he was going through a separation with Allison. He moved out of the house and they were living separately. Fred said in this recent, I think it was like 2 years ago, that he went through a separation with Allison because they were bringing up old memories. And he said, you didn't know this, but I went through a separation with my wife, but I didn't want to bother you with it. And he said, well, thank you.
But the separation was way back in early
Correct.
90s. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I did know that.
And I totally can see him not having an intimate conversation, but you guys socialized a lot, it seemed, in the early 90s and mid 90s, like around Stuttering John's wedding. And I was wondering if you could tell me,
Stuttering John and his wife moved here to Bayville, a couple of blocks away. And so we hung out with them for a while. In the couple of years before I left the show, me and Nancy used to go out and spend the weekend with Fred and Allison out in Amagansett. But nobody knew. I would have never told anybody, because they'd all been like, what's Fred like? What are they like? And meanwhile, Fred couldn't. He's perfectly normal. He's a nice guy. He's just really talented and really smart and really shy. but he's a wonderful human being. But I wasn't going to break his privacy. Just like when they had that fight at the Rainbow Room, Howard was mad at me for a couple of years because I wouldn't spill the beans on what happened. I was like, none of your fucking business. That's my friend. You know, it was a very weird thing with that show because guys don't say what other guys are doing, and that show is built on backbiting. So it's kind of it's a little odd, you know.
Did it bother you at all when it came time to renegotiations over the years, and his negotiations were always, you know, under the table, but yours were always fodder for the air? It always seemed a little unfair that Jackie's renegotiations become
unfair.
fodder.
Unfair is should have been the name of the show. Should have been Unfair. You know, and who cares? You know, you just that's.
We care.
This is the job we have chosen. I knew that, you know. But what I didn't like was, you know, it was so packed with lies. You can spread my shit all over the country. I don't care, but at least let it have a modicum of you know. I mean, Howard was in negotiation until just before we went on vacation, you know, and then we were going on. He came and said, "Hey, listen, I finally, you know, up until like December 14th, everybody thought the show was over, that it was going to end. And then all of a sudden, he got a deal, and he said, you could feel free to go in and cut yourself a deal now because I came to an agreement with Mel." And meanwhile, Tom Chiusano had cancer, and he's going to Paris for the holiday. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to. I said, Tom, we'll just deal with it when you get back. You know, try to be a decent guy. You know, and. But everybody conveniently forgets that Howard had hanging on the edge for like months, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jackie won't come to terms. You know, it was, you know, who cares? You know.
No, we care. The picture painted that you're painting is now so widely known. We interviewed Richie Wilson, who worked for Howard TV for, you know, years, and he said he would get a stomach ache like a week up until the negotiations, because he would find out, like you said, you know, a few days before. And I mean, these are people who have wives and families, and it was just, you know, insanely irresponsible and not okay for them to just do that stuff. And especially since you're a head writer. But they were all a part of Buchwald, which is, to me, if Fred and Robin were a part of Buchwald and they were all trying to get in the early 90s, like acting gigs and stuff on their own, but Buchwald knew Howard is like, you know, the number one radio star and his number one person to cater to. One, how would that work in their favor if they're trying to break off? And two, how did that work for you not being a part of that?
Very early on, like when we first went to mornings, Howard pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, I got some great news for you. Don's going to represent you." And I said, "No, he's not." He said, "What do you mean? I got Don to represent you." I said, "Listen, you get whatever you want. Whatever's left over falls onto Robin. Whatever she doesn't want falls off onto Fred. I'm going to be the fourth bird in line waiting for a fucking worm. No way." And that haunted me all the way out. I mean, Buchwald...
Didn't they see that on their own accord? Didn't they realize that?
Yeah, but, you know, the same old thing, you know, Fred wasn't a stand-up comic and Robin wasn't you know, this was a gig and this was a cherry gig. And that's what made my life so tough, is because, you know, as we were getting better and he was making more and more money and we're getting more and more popular, I'm like, hey, you know, share the pie. And meanwhile, in 40 years, I would venture a guess that Fred has never said the words, "I want more." I don't think he would have ever said that to Buchwald or Howard, and he just would take. And, you know, I found out when I left the show, I'm telling you, Fred worked from, you know, an hour before the show started to an hour after the show ended, and he played the commercials and did the sound effects and wrote. I mean, he literally did 10 times, if 5 times as much work as me. I would walk in and sit down and take out my Sharpie. Howard would start talking. I'd start writing. Howard would say, "We'll see you tomorrow." I'd put down my Sharpie and leave. It was almost that cut and dry. And Fred worked so hard. I found out when I left, I was making almost 3 times as much as him. which is such a fucking, and I wasn't doing all that well, but it's such a crime. I mean, this guy had been there since the beginning, and Howard was rolling in it, and Fred was so important to the show. I don't think anybody realizes, including Fred, he is the building block of that show. He just says, I think Howard would jump off a cliff without Fred. But Fred does not know that. So here I am sitting there. I'm the new guy. And I'm sitting next to a guy that's never asked for more. And I'm going, hey, could I have a little more? And they're like, they didn't say it. But
yeah. How dare you be Oliver Chase? Yeah. How dare you say
why can't you be more like Fred? And nothing against Fred. He's a great guy. He's a company guy,
What was your relationship
like? Now I
like?
get to ask the question: where the fuck did you get the name Fillmore?
Because I'm a huge live music fan, and all the Fillmores and the Winterland shows and the Fillmore East, and I love classic rock. And I used to DJ.
So it's not Millard.
No,
not Millard. Okay.
No,
that's actually a Buffalo thing. Millard Fillmore. I live in East Aurora, and his house is in my town.
There's the connective tissue. What was your relationship like with Buchwald, even though you weren't his client? And same with Karmazin. How did you get along with them professionally and personally? If at all.
I had fun with Buchwald when we hung out. I had great fun with Mel. Mel actually approached me about something that I'm still sorry I turned down. Mel was just a businessman.
Yeah.
Like when one time I walked out and I went in and Mel wrote down all the numbers for 5 years and showed me a staggering total. And I said, wow, Mel, that's really a lot of money, but it's not what I want. It's not enough. And he said, you realize when you walk out here, you can never walk back through this door. I'm like, look, I know all the rules. I know all that crap. And I said, I love you and I appreciate you. And I left. And then Howard called me up and said, I got to have you. And I said, well, we're very far apart. And he said, how far apart? And I told him, he said, all right, I will make up the difference. And so he made up the difference. Every other week I got a check from his company.
Right.
Well, that next, whether it's the next day or the next Monday, whatever it was, I walked in and I was going to take a leak. And as I was going back down the hall, it must have been 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, but Mel came in and I heard him yell, "You're my hero!" I turned around and he's going, "You're my hero!" Because I had said, "Fuck you" to Don and Howard. Said, "This is what I want or I'm walking." And I had gotten the money out of him. And he's been dealing with these guys, and Howard, well, maybe not Howard at that point, but Buchwald and Mel didn't have to work another day in his life from 1978. He was rich. He's playing Monopoly. But it's as important, he's one of those guys, if he plays you in Scrabble, he's going to win. He's going to do what he has to do. So the whole thing, in retrospect, is really, really interesting. And I enjoyed Mel, but Buchwald was so conniving and so backbiting. And he's got a lot to do with me not still being there because they stuck Benji next to me to make me uncomfortable. And it's just so petty. But I kind of had to go because I would have never quit drinking and I'd probably be dead and I wouldn't get to see Samantha's drugs.
You're welcome. So I actually am fascinated by the contractual aspect of this entire thing. I'm a union worker, so I'm a big believer in workers' unions and everything, and I think it's insane that you guys didn't work behind a union. And I wanted to know if you worked behind a union when you were doing any of the television shows.
Yeah.
Well, the union, unions, that's the reason I have the title head writer. Is what happened was we got the Channel 9 show. And they said, all right, blah, 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 blah. And they said, okay, Jackie, you and Fred are going to be segment producers. I said, no, we're not segment producers. We're writers. And they said, well, it's not a guild show, so we can't really have writers on the show or something like that. And I said, no, we're working on the radio all these years or however long. So nobody has any idea that I'm writing to begin with. Nobody has any idea what me and Fred are doing. So all of a sudden, here's a show where the credits are going to run. And they're going to say we're segment producers, which means we might have brought in a dog to be in one of the events or something like that. I said, no, we're writers. And they said, no, we can't make you writers. And that's when I said, you know what? Not only are we writers, I'm the last one to decide what's going in front of Howard. Because Fred writes stuff or somebody else might write something, but they give it to me. And I have the last say what gets passed to Howard. So I'm the head writer.
So was that a union? Was that a union through the network for the show?
You know, I don't know the answer. All I know is either they couldn't call us writers because it was a guild show or because it wasn't a guild show. I am not sure. I just know I stood my ground. And if you look at the Channel 9 credits, it says head writer Jackie Martling, writers Fred Norris, Howard Stern, and then whoever else might have been aboard.
Right.
But that's how that came about, you know. And we were, you know, I get my after pension. You know, we were in the radio union, but it's weird how it works. They only put a portion of your salary towards AFTRA. You know what? I never was interested enough to. It's my life and my money, but I really didn't care. And we were not a regular. Well, look at what that guy's making, or look what that guy's making, because we were such an anomaly. Yeah. It was such an odd show. Like people say, "Oh, Jackie, you know, you make a lot of money, you know, for being you know what radio writers make? They don't make anything." And I said, "No, I'm not a radio writer. I play one on the radio. Like, what are you going to tell Art Carney we're going to pay you what a plumber makes? Go fuck yourself. That's Norton. He just happened to be, you know." And it was very strange, you know. We were, and people say, "God, you make so much money as a writer." It's like saying to Ringo, "You should be happy. You make more money than a lot of drummers." And I'm not a drummer. I'm the drummer of the fucking Beatles. You know, there's a difference. You know, I know that sounds like a well-worn analogy, but it never stops holding up. You know.
Well, could you put the analogy towards, like, I know it's radio and not TV, but what about the Seinfeld cast for them? Like, obviously Seinfeld's going to get the most money, but why shouldn't the rest of the cast, which really made the show what it was, get more money than they were getting? It made perfect sense.
Absolutely. But, you know, like when we first got called to do the E! Show.
Yes.
It was frightening what they offered us. Okay. They offered me and John and Gary like $10,000 a year each. And we're walking along and I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. And we're like crazy. And that's when John, according to John, Gary went in and said, "Yeah, Jackie's trying to get us all riled up and trying to get us to go for more money." And I never tried to organize any crap like that.
But Jackie, you should be organizing. You should have been organizing. You should have been saying, "This is bullshit. If we all say we deserve this much, who's he going to pick up? Who's he going to pick up that's going to lead that parade?" Honestly, you should have picked up the picket signs.
There's no you should have. There's no you should have. You know, you had to be, you know, it's like saying to the Holocaust victims, "Why didn't you say something?" You know, it was a very strange situation. It was funny because Buchwald told everybody what they were getting paid because they would, you know, Fred and Robin, they're signed with Buchwald.
Yes.
And so they just got whatever they said. Gary was just so lucky to be there. John felt so lucky to be there, although he wound up being a big star from the Channel 9 show. But Fran Shea from the E! Channel said, "Listen, I'll handle Jackie." And so we went to the Friars Club for lunch. And it was like $10,000 a year was on the table. $10,000 a year. And we sat down and I said, "This is absurd. I mean, come on, you know, I mean, I don't make much money and I don't even make that much money on the show. But this is, I don't know how I was more gentle, but it was fucking insulting."
Yeah.
And she said, and this is the actual conversation. She said, "Let me ask you a question. Where would you like to be in 5 years?" And I said, in 5 years, I'd like to be the head writer of the best radio show ever. Oh, wait a minute. I am that already. And she was like, and I think I wound up getting her. They had my light off for about a month.
Yep.
Because I hadn't signed with them. So I'm sitting there in the dark or semi-dark, and the cameras aren't on me. And finally I said, all right, 20 grand, 25 grand, whatever it was. And it was really funny because not long after that, I went out to headline at the top of the Riv. And the guys used to come by, guys I had worked with and met along the years, because everybody's working at the, at the Improv or at all the different comedy clubs and the different hotels. And they knew I was at the Riviera, and my show wasn't till 10 o'clock, and I wasn't done till midnight. And I had the same suite that Robert De Niro and Sharon Stone had in Casino. This monstrous 2-level suite.
Yeah,
with all the food and booze, and they treated me like a king. And all these guys came over, and like Max Alexander and Dennis Wolfberg, and Dennis Blair and Mike Ciccone and Don McHenry and Ron Zimmerman, all these guys I'd known forever. And they're going, wow, that's great. You're really kicking ass in the show, and your stand-up was great. And they said, like, and now you guys are on TV. You're on the E! Show. And that's unbelievable. And I said, yeah, 25 grand. And they all their jaws dropped, and they looked at me and they said, Jackie, we know you're doing good, but you can't tell us that you're doing so well that an extra $25,000 a week doesn't make a difference to you.
Yeah.
And I said, a week?
Sam.
That's for a fucking year. And they all just had a heart attack. They couldn't believe. I said, listen, if you go stand on the corner in LA with a shovel and they pick you up to go dig lettuce, you make more than 25 grand a year. And that's what I was getting paid. And they couldn't fucking believe it. And I said, what's really sad is I had to really fight to get the 25 grand. I think by the time I left, it was up to like 50.
Yeah. Sam?
So what drives me crazy is that's almost like an Amazon worker asking for an extra buck during a pandemic in a warehouse. I mean, it's fucking lunacy to me. And I really hate how you're that talented, but the narrative is always going to be this, but it was the best and we were this. I want you to realize that you did make that show what it is. We wouldn't be fans of the show if it weren't for you. You can say, whatever you want and the same thing. You are one of the greatest parts of that show, and I'm not kidding you.
Well,
so
I thought I was
deserve more than that, and you should have gotten more than that.
That's why I had the balls. I'd left the show, I think, 3 times, well, 4 times, including the last time. And each time they came back at me. What nobody realized was what I was asking for was a pittance. I was driving along one time and my phone rang and I answered. Do you know who Dominic Barber was or is?
Of course.
Oh my God, of course.
So he said, Jack, this is Dominic. You got to get back on that show, man. You got to get back on that show. I said, listen, we're separated in money and they just don't want to. And I think this is way, way early. And, he says, what's the problem? What's the problem? Maybe I could help. Maybe I could talk to Mel. What's the deal? And I don't know exactly what the numbers were, but I think it was like, listen, Dominic, I just hit loggerheads with, I'm making 200 grand and I want to make 300 grand or something like that. And he said he had to pull off the road. He said, do you realize that the whole world thinks you're making $1 million or $1.5 million and you're holding out for $2 million and they think you're trying to wreck the show because you're so cheap and so stingy and so greedy? I'm like, no. I said, do you think that's, he said, what the fuck is wrong with Mel that he would take a chance? They just figured they were so strong that there was no way I would ever leave, but they would come back with the money, and the different negotiations, there was a whole negotiations chapter in my book that I didn't put in there. I mean, one day I'll put it in there, but I put in the figures and everything, but I don't think I put the stuff that actually was a little embarrassing to Tom Chiusano. But it really was. It was a regime. I really don't like doing these interviews because it always makes me sound angry or bitter or greedy. To the average person that's making $35,000 or $75,000 a year, and you tell them, well, I was making $500,000 and I should have been making $750,000. They think you cheap fuck or you greedy bastard. And they don't realize that you
don't.
Well,
you're part of the woodwork. I know. And I said, look, I'm not looking for billing, and I don't want you to say Jackie's so important to the show, but just know that I am, and know that we're all helping. I would have loved to grab Fred and said, Fred, but Fred can't go to Buchwald and tell Buchwald to fight for more money, because Buchwald's not going to fight with Buchwald.
Yeah,
it's just it's absurd.
It wasn't like you were Suzanne Summers asking for a piece of the show, and like to be even though you would have liked some of the syndication revenue, the equivalent of like you mentioned before, a 25th of the syndication, because if you're 1/25th of the show, it's a good analogy. But
that had nothing to do with asking for a piece of the show. That was just how I was calculating the numbers. Like you must have heard that in another interview, because I don't think I just said that. But that was absolutely, I had friends. I went on the road and did gigs, and I'd talk to the other owners and the other general managers, and they tell me what was up. Yeah. And they tell me how popular I was with the listeners and everything. They would really pull my string, but they were also very nice about it. And they were like, You couldn't use really other radio writers as a template, because they weren't as successful as you guys were. So it was apples and oranges. Right. There was no comparing.
Well, during that time,
just one sec, Sam. I just have one question I got to ask, because I've heard the mythology over the years. The Channel 9 roast, which I think was 92 or 91, maybe when it was recorded, and you guys had Pat Cooper and Henny Youngman was on as well. After it came on the air later that, well, you didn't like how you performed, which is fair, but the
roast as a whole.
The question I've got is, it was put forth by Gary years later that he claims that you believe it was set up so they wouldn't laugh when you got up there, but
I can't
buy that.
What happened was that the audience was about 10 strippers who were morons. So it's the funniest person in the world wasn't going to make them laugh. But I got 0 laughs from anybody, including the crew or anybody, which can happen to anybody. But Pat Cooper, and to this day, I don't know whether he was being Pat, fooling around, or being Pat to make me feel bad, whatever it was. But Pat told me that this girl came around with a clipboard and told everybody not to laugh when I was on. And the girl with the clipboard was Karen, who was like one of the managers of the show. So it was a very viable thing, and it could have happened. And if they did that, I was pissed off, because I thought it was really wrong. But there was every chance it didn't happen too. But once again, it's all a little bit of theater. But it was horrendous, And I said some pretty funny things, but pretty horrible things, And looking back, you could see why a bunch of strippers would not have laughed at that, because it would have gone over their heads or whatever. But the whole thing about Pat telling me that a girl came around with a clipboard, I did not make that up. That was something, whether it was true or not true or whatever, But Pat kind of said it kind of as a throwaway, which made it seem very believable.
Yeah.
But those shows were crazy. Those were some crazy times. The Channel 9 shows.
Well, the roast, that roast specifically, we did a walkthrough for, and they probably didn't laugh because they had a warm up of unfunny for an hour. I mean, it was just him running around.
He wouldn't shut the fuck up.
He wouldn't stop. It was like,
who is this?
Calm
Howard?
down,
Howard.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he would, because he didn't want anybody to get started. Yeah, it was don't really brutal. It that well, we all had a lot going on. We were the writers, and we had to worry about the segment before and after, blah blah blah. But who gave a fuck?
Obviously,
go ahead, Sam. I've got another question that's going to be
because it's the kind of thing you can't say to Howard,
No.
You know how you are. Don't be like that. you can't really say that. You know. Stop acting so much like you big fucking monkey. You know.
Well, it just dovetailed with almost all of his TV appearances where he'd just do radio shtick to fill time, and you didn't realize you don't need to do that when you're on a talk show. Just have a conversation. And I mean, I guess it's neither here nor there. If people are fans, they love him regardless. But I was a comedy fan first before I was a Howard fan, and I knew all those classic Carson appearances by Rickles and Winters and Jackie Mason and Steve Martin. It was all just very organic. And sometimes it made it seem like he was way too. It seemed like Howard would try to force things too much instead of.
You know, but I didn't. I wasn't part of that. Like he never asked me to help him write any of those.
Sure.
So I never watched. I didn't. You know, I was surprisingly unplugged.
Good job.
I never listened to the show before I was on it. I never listened to the show after I was on it.
Yeah.
I never listened to best of. The only times if you guys really know this, it's interesting that you know stuff. I listened once in a while in the very, very beginning when I first went in and I was on the show and I had never heard of this guy, and I wasn't a radio guy. I was a hippie that rode around in my car listening to the Eagles and Chicago 2 and listened to my own stand-up. Maybe 10-10 to see if the world had blown up. But I didn't know from radio. Even when I was on BAB, they were playing 9221. They were playing my jokes on BAB every morning at 8 o'clock. But I don't think I even had it on my dial, you know. And
I've listened to your whole history. I know everything about you, so keep going.
we're a little creepy that way.
That's all right. So, when I went in there, you know, I'm antsy. So I'm sitting there, and they said, "Come back next week," and I'm there. And he used to do this Mama Look a Boo Day, which was a black helicopter reporter. So I wrote down some black type, you know, lines. And when I came in, like the second or third week or whatever, I said, "Hey, I got some lines here for Mama Look a Booba Day." And he kind of looked at me like, not mean, but just like, I don't need help, you know, but he took them. And then like, I'm listening to the show and all of a sudden I hear the lines that I had given him. And I'm like, aha. And then like, the next time I came in, I said, "I got some lines." And he goes, "Thank you." You know, it was very funny. It was very innocent. But then I started listening once in a while to see if he was going to use them.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I know exactly, you know, where were you when JFK got shot? You guys weren't born yet, but I remember I was on a short step ladder in my kitchen of the house we were renting. And the reason I know is because I was fixing something. And in 35, 40, 50 years, I've fixed two things. And I was fixing something. I don't mind be changing a light bulb or something. But I'm up there doing something. And Gary comes in and he goes, "Hey, Hal, there's the girl here. She wants to take all the clothes off." And he's like, "Oh, bring her in." And the girl came in and Howard said, you know, this is long before I knew anything about the show, but I kind of had the vibe that what happens on the air really happens. Like it's not theater of the mind. It really does happen. The only difference is that, you know, he says this girl sitting here is a 9 and she's really a 1.5.
For sure.
But there's still a girl there. She might have 14 tits, but there's a girl there. And so Gary brings a girl in and Howard says, "Who are you?" And she says, "My name is Maria. I work the door at the Comedy Factory outlet in Philadelphia, and my favorite comedian is Jackie Martling." Wow. And I almost fell off the fucking stool because I had wanted to bang her forever, but you know, I never hardly had time to even pay any attention. And she was trying to be a comic, and just like all comedy clubs, you work the door or you work as, you know, and you saddle yourself in, and eventually they give you some stage time. You know, that's what Brian Regan did in the comic strip in Fort Lauderdale. So so that was a man. But I've never ever heard that tape, and I don't know if it exists. And I would imagine they might have erased that 5 seconds in. I mean, I imagine
we have fans who have the entire catalog of his show. So if that does exist, we will ask for that for you. So
I mean, what are
we
the
can
odds?
get we can
what
get
are
that.
the odds of her saying that? I don't even know.
Honestly, we will have it for you if this person who has recorded literally every show since '82.
Wow, that's the. What's funny is I don't even know. She probably had to know, but I don't think I had been there that long. She might not have had any idea that I was part of that show yet, but who'll know? And what was really funny is there was a guy that from the beginning hated us when we went on in Philadelphia, and he wrote bad crap about us, and it was a world war, and he wound up marrying Maria, the girl that got naked on the show. Which you can't make that. Stu Wajkowski, and she married him, and I can never think of her last name because there's Maria Melito that works at another radio station, and that's the only name that comes into my head. But she was cute, like Richard Jennings used to fool around with it. It was a whole thing. But she really did come in. I guess she had on a fur coat and took it off, and it was pretty funny. I got to do that scene in Private Parts, which was really a nice payback.
Just going to take a one alternate direction for a bit. When Robin released her book in '95, which we reviewed extensively, but a lot of you guys felt that it was bullshit, and I want you to hear this clip. So just bear with me for a second. It's a short clip of Bowie talking about it. Okay, this is 2008, probably one of the wrap-up shows when he's at Sirius.
This is long after I'm gone. Yeah.
Oh, sure, no but I want you to hear what Gary has to say about you regarding the book.
These urges to do stuff like that back when she was going through a lot of these problems.
It's funny because I read the book and I heard all that. These were things I didn't know, and Jackie used to get all irritated by it. Jackie thought that Robin made stuff up for the book, and you know what he used to call her book?
What?
Quivers, a lie.
I love that line.
But that itself is a lie. I do not remember ever saying that.
Okay.
I mean, I might have said she made up stuff in the book, but to tell you the truth, I'm pretty sure I don't know if I read it. I know I used to read.
You did out loud.
Well, yeah, you read parts of it.
That was, that was the funniest organically grown bit there ever was. We were trapped in a limousine on our way to a screening. We were trapped in New York City traffic, and Robin had just given everybody a copy of her new book. And we're sitting there bored, and I looked in my bag and pulled out the book and just started reading from it at random, and it was so funny.
So can I ask you? Sorry, Sam, because this is one little thing I'll get right out of the way. Could you please do us all a favor, and if I send you a little excerpt, could you please read it in the Robin voice? It's just a little paragraph, just for our fans.
It wasn't just you. Everyone, when they read that book, I remember the day after, and it was Fred, you, Howard. You were all shocked by the book. You were all like, "What?"
The city was being of little help. They refused to even consider Leia's case so long as Heidi and I were assisting her. I haven't done this in 40 years. We were instructed that we would have to abandon her before she could get into the social services system. Our staying in her life could probably have landed her right back at home. But abandoning her to the city would justifiably be viewed by her as rejection. It was a genuine catch-22. I found myself screaming at the people who were supposed to be helping me when I could get them on the phone. But the help we needed just wasn't there. I was so pompous and so funny. Oh God, you're so ridiculous.
Bravo.
And who knows? It could have all been. It could have been true. It could have not been true. To quote my old friend Richard Belzer, modern physical science has yet to come up with a unit of measurement that would express how little I give a fuck about her or her book.
Oh my God.
Well, okay.
I loved
okay,
though.
Go ahead, Sam.
You guys, she came in the next day, she had to do a book signing, and it was the funniest shit ever. She was late, and all she got was a little bit of shit about being late. And you guys said, "Well, what time did you leave for the airport?" And she goes, a half hour before my flight. What did you do? And then she goes, and then she was late and she missed her flight getting back. And she said, well, they didn't tell me to pack. And then she goes, nobody told me to pack. And then I didn't know. I laid in bed and moaned. And you and Howard and Fred, it might have been one of my most favorite segments ever. And she got so mad. She got so mad. She walked out. She goes, that's it. I'm leaving. Oh, because you said that.
So great. I remember one time I said, I wrote all the Stern acts. It took me a couple of years to talk Howard into doing Karnak, into doing Stern act.
Yeah.
And finally, I said, look, I will take the heat. I'll write the jokes. I'll write the insults. I will take the heat. And which also meant get the credit. And there was some of the funniest shit. And people used to die. And one time we did Stern act, and she leads the charge. She leads the laughs. And if she doesn't laugh, it doesn't work.
Right.
She laughs after everything he says.
We know that now.
People say, what the fuck is she doing? I say, it's like saying to Costello, what's Abbott there for? Without Costello, there's no Abbott. So she was there, and she sandbagged Sternak, and she laughed at nothing. And she knew she was fucking with me. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I said, Howard, get ready with the button, because I'm going to curse. Get ready with the button. Are you ready? Robin, you fucking cunt. I said that on the radio. It's the only time I think I ever got bleeped. And then we went to commercial, and she came running in the room like it was a big joke. I said, nah, I'm pissed off. Get out of here, you fucking cunt. And 2 minutes later, we're friends again. It's a foxhole. That's right. We're in a foxhole.
But she's got an extreme personality where she didn't talk to you for months, and she admitted it on air. One day she said, well, I haven't talked to him off air for months. And you were like, are we talking again? And nobody knew. You were like, well, she was completely icing you out.
And
there was no
she was
reason
told
given.
leave him. She was told leave him alone, and she did.
I once again, I could have gave a fuck,
Yeah.
I said, you're not talking to me? Who do I thank? You know what I mean?
Perfect. About 2-3 years later, her parents actually came in studio. Were you there for that? I have not heard the audio, even though I have that year. For some reason, it's missing.
I think so, but I don't. God,
remember?
I don't really, and I should. That's definitely something I would remember.
Yeah.
But I can't say for sure I wasn't there.
Because I don't recall you taking many sick days or anything.
No, we didn't all go out to lunch. I'm just wondering if it happened after I had already left the show.
Would that be a common thing, like near the news, or like back near the end of the show, like very last few minutes or something, and they just popped in for a 5-minute thing?
That literally never happened until, when we were making private parts.
Yeah.
Sometimes what's her face would come in, Howard's
Judith
movie
Regan.
wife.
Oh, Allison. Sorry, Mary McCormick.
Mary McCormick would come in, and then Beth would come in once in a while and sit there. But aside from that, nobody. Maybe Judith Regan came in, but I don't really remember that. But
Sam,
you said Beth would come in and sit there. There's obviously a lot of change in the show once Beth became involved with Howard, and also Dominic Barbara, I don't know if you know this, went on a podcast, and he said that Angie Everhart and Robin Givens were fake girlfriends. That Robin Givens was one of his clients, needed some star power, dating Howard. They were both Buchwald clients.
Yeah.
So the mad tear that supposedly happened with these only two alleged.
I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't care.
So okay.
You
so
mean was
during
he fucking him? Was he not fucking him? Were they really?
No. We know he wasn't. We know he wasn't. That's fine. what I'm asking is for Beth, when she came involved with the show, what were things like with the dynamic with you guys, like the show
There
and
was
Beth?
no interaction. She came in and sat over on the side and looked at him back and forth. There was no interaction. Maybe hello. Now, me and Nancy actually, I think, went on a date with them. We might have gone on 2 dates with them, but she was nice enough. But
Richie Wilson dropped an interesting anecdote when an interview we had with him. He said that Chevy Chase went to their wedding, and he said he dropped a nuke in the middle of their wedding. He basically gave the most uproarious, inappropriate, awful toast in their wedding and left. I don't know if you know that.
I don't know that. Here I had been a writer for 18 years, and depending on who you ask, I had something to do with him getting as huge as he got and as rich as he got. You can't break your arm patting yourself on the back, but I had something to do with it. And then, he invited people to his wedding that he had met a month before, and I wasn't invited to the wedding. And it was like, I was off the show, but sometimes guards come down, and then we had our own show on Sirius.
That's right.
For 8 years. 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And a week before Thanksgiving, they unceremoniously just fired us, just dropped the show without any reason, any forethought. Just said, hey, this is your last week. And then Sirius threw a 60th birthday party for Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only were we on Sirius, but we were on a Howard Stern channel.
Yeah.
We were one of the shows on his channel. And I wasn't invited to his 60th birthday party. And I must have had 30 people say, Jackie, can I be your +1 to go to Howard's birthday party? And when I told them I wasn't invited, they wouldn't believe me. They said, look, you don't have to lie to me. I'm like, no, I'm not invited. And I totally get it, because if he's having his 60th birthday party surrounded by every celebrity in Manhattan, and if one person came up and said, hey, Howard, it's really nice to see Jackie again, that would have wrecked his night. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm telling you, that's, how could he not have me there? How do you do that? You got me talking shit, but as long as I get a chance to tell the truth.
Yeah.
No.
Sometimes you get on the air and talk to people, and I can almost feel their eyes rolling, like I'm making stuff up. And
we're not,
Jackie, no.
We're not going to lie to you. Our mandate for our show is basically doing an autopsy on the current show, basically on a weekly basis. But that doesn't mean we can't do an interview and just ask people about themselves. And if whatever they want to say, it's totally up to them. It's your story to tell, and I don't think that's anything bad. But you met with Robin.
Most people really aren't interesting. It's fun that you're interested. When we started mornings, and we would sit there at Howard's desk before we went on the air, and we'd be farting around, and just like any group of guys, like maybe Howard tell a story, and then Gary tell a story, and then Fred tell a story, and every time my story did not only trumped them, but it was like in another league for how crazy and wild and funny it was, because I lived a completely different life than those guys.
Sure.
And I'd start telling them a story, and I would see that their eyes were rolling, looking at each other like, oh, is he so full of shit? And about 4 months later, 6, at some point, it all of a sudden dawned on them like, holy shit, he's not making this stuff. And this is real. And that's when Howard started saying, go ahead, tell this story on the air, or tell that story. And then I tell a story on the air, and and then they tell me how bad the story was, and then everybody say how great it was. But it was really funny. They used to make fun of me. I thought this was so great, because they'd start talking about television or something, and Gary and Howard and Fred and they all knew every episode of the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family and all those, those sitcoms from the 70s. And I couldn't even told you any of the characters. And they would try and make me feel like I what was I like? I was raised like a wolf because I didn't know these TV shows, and I'm like, while you assholes were home watching television with mommy and daddy, I was out drinking and smoking pot and fucking girls at college. I was older than them. I was out living my life, and you're watching the fucking Brady Bunch. Oh, you don't know the episode where Charlie was the milkman? I'm like, no, I would, I was finger fucking somebody, you asshole.
Jackie, you know what's so funny is meanwhile you say you were the odd man out for not knowing that. I'm the odd man out for my age during this podcast because I know all old TV shows. And everyone's like, how the fuck do you know that?
There's no reason.
It's weird how it comes around. Weird how it comes around.
Jackie, could you please, I know you told it on Kumia's show probably 6 years ago, but I would love if you could tell the story about the little Canon camera that you got from the show. It was without the bag.
You know what? I don't know. I remember this story, but I don't remember exactly how the reveal happened. But what happened was we got such horrible crap for Christmas. So we got nothing. I can show you that up until a couple years ago, I would get a Christmas card every year. And it was obviously a Christmas card from somebody who had been taught how to sign Howard's name, which is so
Laura?
funny. And yeah, and hold on, I think I got it right there. It makes me laugh. Hold on.
Oh my God, go fuck yourself. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm going to laugh my ass off right now. Laura Lackner signed Christmas card.
I'll be one.
Okay, all three.
I'm looking.
All three.
Okay.
I just kept them because they were funny. And he makes his H in a certain way.
Yes.
And they think by having the H right, and it's so
so the FBI wouldn't pass it?
Impersonally personal. But I read this and I fell down. Jackie, hope that today is the beginning of a great day ahead. Wishing you a wonderful year. I was like, you can at least fucking proofread it. Think of you on your special day. Think of you. This is literally 2 different years. Think of you on your special day. Hope it's a great year ahead. Sending good thoughts. Think of you on your special day. Hope it's a great year ahead. Sending lots of good thoughts. I mean, it's just. I mean, why bother? And other people are like, well, at least he said it to you. Like Jesus Christ.
It's a bare minimum bullshit. It's bare minimum bullshit always.
Well, I was very good friends with Les Paul, the guitar player.
Yeah.
And, he just loved my filthy jokes. So we got along. So I met him when he was 85 and we hung out till he died at 94. But he'd been a pretty miserable prick for most of his life. And no relationship with his kids or anything. But here I met this 85-year-old man that loved my dirty jokes and we got along great. But he had this guy, Lou Pala, who recently passed away, one of the greatest guys in the world. And he was like the rhythm player for Les's band. And he was like 78 when I met Les, and Les was like 80, 85, 86. And Les would say, how old are you, Lou? And he'd say 78. And Les would say, oh, and you're still playing, which was funny. And one day I was hanging out with Lou and it came up with how unbelievable cheap Les was. And I guess they said that he had a real lot of he had millions. And they said they had so much cash in his house because he came up in the Depression and they didn't trust banks. And he was a real oddball, but an absolute fucking genius beyond geniuses. And I said, listen, don't talk to me about cheap. I spent all those years at Howard. He's really cheap. And Lou said, you want to have a contest? And I said, sure. He goes, 28 years I'm playing rhythm guitar with Les. Not a Christmas card.
Wow.
I said, okay, you win. I mean, forget about a birthday party or a party or a car or a $5 bill. Not a Christmas card. I'm like, holy shit. Okay, you win. That comes with the territory. Who knows? But what happened was we never got anything. And then one year we got an actual gift. And I got home. I remember where I was. I was in my apartment. and I opened it up, and there's this Canon camera.
Yeah.
And I didn't know shit from the internet or I knew a little bit, but I didn't know anything as far as hooking up cameras. But I was like, this is a nice camera, and that's amazing. And then I'm looking around, and when you buy, if you buy a TV and you get a remote, they give you the batteries with the, they take care of business.
Yeah.
So I open this thing up and I'm looking around. I'm like, wow, this is a really nice camera, but there's no case, and that's really odd. And I don't know, was the next day or a year later or something, but I was talking to somebody and I said, Howard finally loosened up, and we actually got a pretty decent digital camera last Christmas. I don't know what they cost, but it was an actual decent camera. It's kind of funny though. It said that it should have a case with it, but there was no case in it in the package. And the guy said, "What are you talking about? A case comes with every camera, unless maybe you got one of those promotional cameras that they send out. When they send out the promotional cameras, they don't put cases in them." And I'm like, that motherfucker! Somebody must have sent him a case of Canon cameras, and he passed them out. What are the odds of us ever fucking finding that out? I laughed for an hour.
Jackie, no doubt. So speaking of, you told that story, Fillmore said you told it on Anthony's show, and I love Opie and Anthony. I love Kumia. And I want to know, since you guys were coming up during the same time period, Opie and Anthony were, coming up after you guys, mid-90s. They started to get real popular around 95, 96, 97. And then they even developed a bigger fan base. And my feeling, because I was a fan of both, was Howard didn't want to compete with them. He wanted to shut them up. He wanted to silence them. They blew a radio surprise that they were supposed to have banned on. Opie and Anthony found out. And then they also reported on his daughter overdosing at the Jingle Ball. So, I knew that they didn't get along. And I wanted to know what was that.
Whose daughter OD'd where? I don't know that.
They... Emily
reported on.
Supposedly.
No, it was Deborah at the Jingle Ball.
Yeah.
And
no,
that's fine. No, but that's fine. But I wanted to know, what was that tension like in real life with Howard? How much were they a thorn in their side? Because you were there for those years.
I was there, but I didn't care. And it's so funny because when I came on NBC, Imus was on in the morning.
Yep.
And, when you're at the top of the hill, it's everybody else's jobs to throw rocks at you. It's king of the mountain. You're on the top of the mountain. You're the British soldiers. We're going to hide in the woods with our guns and shoot you as you go marching by. And that's how we're going to take over, So, Howard would break balls and talk about shit about Imus. And Imus pulled management, went in to see management and said, listen, I don't want that new guy talking about me. I don't want I don't want my name being mentioned on his show.
Mm-hmm.
And they told Howard, listen, you can't talk about Don Imus on your show. And Howard I wasn't there. I was only there one day a week, but I know he was enraged. Like, how fucking unfair is that? How can you do that to me?
Well, then he did the same thing to Opie and Anthony.
Later, 20 years later, that's where I was going with this. You fucked my punchline. But the truth is, all of a sudden, it was like he told Mel, I don't want those guys talking about me because now he's king of the mountain. And, and they could just take shots at him. But, but that's the game. That is the game, So I thought that was really ridiculous and unfair. I didn't know those guys. I didn't really pay attention to that whole thing, because we didn't have them on the air,
Anthony, did a contest to be you. He did the best Jackie Martling.
He was leaning on my shoulder. He was leaning on my shoulder when he did it. Yeah, it was great. It was fun.
Yeah.
He's a very good impressionist, and I love Compound Media and everything that he's built. And I thought that show was great. And that was the first time, I think, as a fan, where I was like, wow, this person's very hypocritical. Because I remember them, railing against it. And all the time I was like, there's no way Jackie doesn't see this as anything but him.
Of course, I knew that, but I didn't care because they worked so hard to make me feel like I didn't have a stake in it, that I wasn't part of it. You know, no,
That's
you know,
sad.
you're a work for hire. You know, you don't know anything. You don't. I mean, you don't know the whole story. The whole story of Private Parts is unbelievable.
Oh yes.
And I didn't actually put that in my book, but I don't know if you're aware of that whole thing where they were making the movie without me. I was not going to exist.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah,
and it's crazy. I'm sitting there in a foxhole with those guys every day, and they're making a movie. And I think Fred might not have been a part of it either, because you know it was going to be the Howard Stern show without any help. You know, and then they had to redo it, so they cleverly came up with a way of doing his life story where you never saw me pass him a note. I came in at the very end of the thing, like when they had already gotten to Pluto, and they hadn't even left the rocket ship. They haven't even gotten on the rocket ship for Pluto yet.
Right.
You know,
so we know how, in the film world, a lot of we know that it becomes science fiction by the time the editors are done with it, and by the time writers keep rewriting stuff. But I had a question about maybe 8 years ago.
I will tell you, it was a great movie. And people say, what's your most fun times? Some of my most fun times in show business were the days making that movie, you know, sitting naked next to Jenna Jameson for 3 days in a row and laughing, you know, it was really a trip. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. About maybe 8 years ago, maybe 7 years ago.
I finally heard Canada. You just said a boot.
We don't.
First clue.
I give him shit about Sori all the time,
and I give her crap about elementary. So you met with. I guess you went to dinner with Robin. She was in the 70s. She was into Est, which became Landmark for him, and then she met with you for some dinner or lunch, and then she felt she had to apologize or make amends. I know you're friends with Robin, so I'm. It's not about busting balls, but did it seem a little odd?
No, you know, people were saying, no, she's going around and she's making friends with, making up for old things that happened. I didn't know, because I didn't listen to the show and I wasn't privy to it. But she called up and said, let's go out to dinner, or I think it was dinner. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And we went out to dinner. And it wasn't until the end that she said, well, would you be interested in this, Landmark? And I already knew of it. My partner, Ian, his good friend is involved in it, and that shit's not for me. Hold your breath and don't go to the bathroom. And so we went out to dinner, and meanwhile, I bought us dinner. I said, "Listen, I don't need you going on the air and saying that cheap fuck Jackie." I had to buy him dinner, so I didn't get any Landmark, and I paid for dinner, but we had fun. We always laughed together. We always had a great time.
Yeah.
What was it like during the time where he ran for governor? Which I obviously know it was more of a publicity ploy, but I mean, a lot of people believed in it, just in the same demagoguery fashion of somebody who's popular. I mean, a lot of people, he won the libertarian vote, which I don't know if you realize is an incredible feat. I mean, there's not much people who can get on a ballot, let alone, actually be the popular person in a party. And I wanted to know what it was like to be on that tour.
It was a bit. It was like just a bit that got played.
Yeah, but do you understand that that's like a bit where he got on a major political party?
but we also had a movie, and he had a book, and we had a TV show, and we had another TV show. Everything was happening so fast and furious. Yeah. What are we doing today? Oh, Howard's running for governor. Oh, all right. It was like, and the greatest thing was when they told me you had to tell everybody how much money you had. And boy, you've seen people do U-turns, but never like he did that U-turn. Like, wow! Exit stage left.
Yeah. Well, he bullshitted because he didn't have to reveal what he earned. He just had to say that he earned more than $250,000, which clearly he was making that before at NBC.
You know what? These are details. I don't know. I don't really give a fuck. Maybe that was his
fair.
Exit. All I know is I wrote the platforms, his 2 platforms for being governor. Do you remember what those were?
It was the you want the death penalty and the potholes.
No. I went to 2 gigs in Connecticut, and I would come home from a gig in Connecticut, and with these mercury vapor lights, and the place was lit up like a Christmas tree. and they were working on the roads late at night. And I had spent so much time in traffic on the Grand Central in the summer. I'm like, what, Howard, tell them to put up the lights at night and work at night so we can get home at in a human amount of time. So one of his platforms was to have lights so they can do the construction work at night. And the other platform was we were going to fill the potholes with the homeless. Yeah. which was just so horrible.
This is very humanitarian. I honestly think that run of governor, and people really believed in that. I mean, people bought pins. We have fans of ours who still have the governor pins. Howard stood for governor and believed in that. It's because it was populist messaging of everyday policies that affected people's lives. So when he was running for governor of a state, these policies that he was suggesting are actually things that people really did give a shit about and wanted fixed. Like they really did.
Just like QAnon, there are people stupid enough to believe that he was serious about filling the potholes with the homeless.
Okay.
Yeah, not only are we going to have traffic and have lights at night, we're going to take care of all the potholes. And you got to pull somebody aside and say, listen, you stupid cocksucker, that's a joke. You know what I mean?
He took it all the way. He took it almost all the way.
I was so stupid,
Jackie, there's not too many things. I'm not shocked by just about anything, I have to say, having grown up with all kinds of comedy as well. But I want to know, was there ever a bit on the show while you were there that you felt you guys went too far, or somebody went too far? It wasn't necessarily you, because like the Debbie Tay thing, for example, when Chauncey brought in her ashes, I couldn't take that. I couldn't. I couldn't go with it.
It's like everything. Like number one, were those really her bones? Who knows?
Sure.
If they were, who cares? I'm sure she didn't mind. On the whole Channel 9 show, there were only 2 bits we did that didn't make it to air. Mm-hmm. We dressed Fred up as Jesus and crucified him and put him on a cross. And he was Jesus, I'm telling you. And they said, you know what? We better draw a line right here. So that didn't air. And we also did handicap beat the clock.
Yeah.
And we had a guy with one leg competing against a guy in a wheelchair. And it was unfucking real. And Al Rosenberg was one of the writers on the show. And he said, Jackie, you said maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life. Because the guy that was competing, who had one leg, was such a piece of shit and so rude and such an annoying fuck. It was unbelievable, and everybody hated him. And Al came up to me at one point and said, "Oh, that guy's an asshole." And I said, "You know what? He didn't lose his leg; it ran away."
Yeah,
I thought that was so great.
I want to ask you a couple of things about, number one, your book. I went to get it, and it's not on Kindle. It's only available through audiobook. I went on the Amazon site, and it's not available. Is there any chance I can get the ebook?
Of course, it's on Kindle.
It's not. It's not listed as being for purchase on Kindle. Many other versions, but not Kindle.
Well, is the digital version available anywhere?
I haven't checked. That's pretty much where I go when
it's got. I'll check, but I'm sure it's on Kindle. A lot of people really love the audio version because they said, "Wow, it's like having you back on the radio." I'll tell you though, one of the reasons when I found you guys, all this whole Stern thing, I don't like running around and talking and this sucks and that sucks and everything.
Sure,
but I like word getting out that I had a book out because he never mentioned my book to anybody. So a real lot of his listeners have no idea I put a book out there. I mean, eventually the word it's been out for years. So eventually the word gets back. Mm-hmm. So I figured I'd come on your show and I say, hey, I have a joke. I have a book out, my autobiography, and people are really enjoying it. And even if you hate me from the show, you would love the book because it's just a trip through time. And it's really funny because I don't know how long ago, but maybe 2 years ago at this point, I got a big bump in sales. Mm-hmm. And my guy said, "What'd you do?" Because I promote it when I do podcasts, and I promote it when I, here, there, and everywhere, and on Twitter and everything. But all of a sudden I got a bump. And then what had happened was Howard put out another book.
Yeah.
And if you put out a book and somebody buys it on Amazon,
yeah,
underneath it says people who bought this book also sometimes bought these books. And here's my book. And somebody's buying Howard's new book. They had no idea I had a book. They've already got their mouse out. They got their credit card in. With one click, they get my book too for $15. So all of a sudden, I sold a shitload of books. So I'm sure he'd kill himself if he knew he helped me.
and just so the fans know, to those who are listening to this right now, it's really important. The audiobook for Jackie's book is unexpurgated, unlike Quivers of Life and even the Colford book. They're like 2 cassettes. I don't know what this would be in CD in MP3 form, but there's like 8 hours of Jackie's book. So the audiobook is the full shebang.
Every single paragraph and every syllable, and it's so funny because I thought, oh boy, what a drudgery this is going to be. And I'm telling you, sitting there for 3 days, it was fun because here I'm getting to absorb my book and really enjoy it. And you can't ad lib, you can't go on a tangent and tell another story. You got to read what's in front of you. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And they were all really big fans, the guys at Audible. So we had just a terrific time, so
Sam?
hopefully, a lot of people seem to enjoy it,
I really love your book, and I think the most surprising thing is your backstory. You're just an interesting person. Just how you landed where you land, to me, is fascinating. I just love it. You love someone so much as a presence on the show. I think you're amazing.
So I have a whole second book, and I will send it to you guys, and you'll get a kick out of it. And I can't believe the stuff that I left out. Jeez, it's so much great shit.
I was going to say, was it a matter of you didn't want to be litigated against? Was it too big?
No. I just wrote the book, and then I wrote, and then it turned out I was allowed to have this many words.
Yeah.
So it was like Sophie's Choice. I'll use this. Do I put in the stupid chapter about me with the Roosevelts? Well, fuck the world. I want that in there. I don't care. Do I put in this? Yeah. I put in what I wanted. But of course, once you do that, it's like the songs you leave off. If you're a songwriter, all of a sudden the songs you left off the album are your favorites,
Yeah.
I'll look through those extra chapters and go, how the fuck did you not put this one in there? And there's great ones. And there's Rodney stories and Jackie Mason stories and Soupy Sales stories. I promise you'll get a major kick out of it.
We'd love that. Sam?
Just so you know, I'm glad you got a bump from Stern's book coming out, but Benji had a problem with Stern's book, and he brought it up on the show. He was supposed to get a writing credit for his book because he wrote most of the questions for the interviews.
Sure.
And was promised, because Buchwald's his agent, that he was going to get a writing credit. Didn't get the writing credit, brought it up on air unbeknownst to Howard, and he got screamed off the air and hasn't been in studio since.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That tells the tale of that show. Shoot the Messenger. Like he that doesn't make him in the least bit wrong. That's like me saying, no, I'm a writer. I'm not a segment producer. I'm a writer. I'm not asking, tell them I built the sets even though I didn't.
Right.
Just tell them what I actually did.
He said, just so you know, I wrote most of those questions. And he said, get the fuck out of here. Get out of here.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to lead into this. We talked about this before we started recording. You've got the film, the documentary Joke Man, which is yet to come out. But when I saw the trailer originally, I thought, man, this looks great. It not like I was surprised, but it looked great. And there's one section of the trailer, which is no longer online as far as I know, where a note is literally being passed over physically over some screen from you, I presume, to Howard. And you've never seen that. We've never seen that ever, as far as I know.
This guy, Rob Perna, happened, I think how that happened, I think he was walking around and videotaping me, and I think I brought him into the studio. I don't know if Howard's visible in that shot, but he might be. What was really crazy is when they decided they were going to do the movie and that they were going to redo it with Ivan Reitman. Ivan wanted to sit in on the show. and see what it was all about. And so what's Howard going to say? It's Ivan Reitman.
Yep.
And Ivan came in and said, yeah, this is my producer, Danny Goldberg. And two of them sat there, and fucking Danny, this was right after Sony came out with those little tiny video cameras with the little tiny hi-8 cassette or whatever it was called.
Yep.
And Danny sat there and started videotaping. And he's videotaping me writing a note and me putting it up. And I could tell that Howard was just shitting. He just wanted to say, you can't do that, but he didn't dare.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know where that footage exists somewhere. I mean, Danny sat there. They were doing research for the film. Little did they know that was never going to make it near the air. Never make it through the.
Well, so what's the projected release? Would you say?
What for the? It's done. We really wanted to take it to film festivals because the Q&A at the film festivals will be at least as interesting as the documentary.
Yeah.
Because not for everybody, but it drives me crazy how people are still so interested in the Stern Show and the old Stern Show, and still, I mean, I've been off there for 20 years, and people talk to me like I left yesterday.
Yeah.
I was just telling a kid earlier today on a podcast that I got an email like 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something, and it was the greatest compliment that I couldn't have made up. He said, Jackie, how you doing? I'm from Toronto, and I'm 27 years old, and I started listening to the Howard Stern Show in 2007. And I'm like, wow, I'm long gone, right? And he goes, and it instantly became my favorite show. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. And then I found out that a lot of the old shows were on YouTube.
Yep.
And I started looking at the old shows, and he said to me, it's like having a new favorite band and then finding out that their earlier albums were much better.
Yep.
And how great a compliment is that? I was like, holy shit, man. Let me send you a shirt or something.
You should realize that not only from that, but every day of your life, I just hope you know that there are so many people that just adore you for that time period. Just think that is the best, most funniest, gut-busting, pull yourself over in the car laughing experience, and it's because of you. And I also want to say
I had something to do with it.
You did.
It is nice that the funny thing is like anything, as time goes along, those years become more special and more golden. And the more he drags it out, and I don't know what good, bad, or other, if you talk to 10 people about his show now, one person hates it, one person loves it. I get emails from people saying, they tell me, dry up, the show's better than it ever was when you were there. And, the best move they ever made was getting rid of you. And, I get a lot of those emails too. So, it keeps you humble. But it makes them seem more and more special and more special. So I know if I took this documentary to a film festival in Pittsburgh, it'll sell out, and I'll get lots of interesting questions from the baby boomers that are 70 years old. But I'm going to get just as many questions from 25-year-olds that are still interested. It's flattering. It's flattering.
So just on that note, have you seen the Gilbert documentary? And if you did, what did you think about it?
Well, I loved it. I did Gilbert's podcast like 4 times.
Yep.
And one time I did it, Neil came in and he shot the entire, I was there, it's usually like 50 minutes. Me and Gilbert sat there for an hour and a half, and we roared and laughed and went fucking nuts for an hour and a half. And Neil shot the whole thing. And then I found out, this is for Gilbert's documentary. And, there's not one frame of me in the documentary. But it's fucking great. We had a screening at the Friars Club. Yeah. And it's really good. I've known that guy, forever. Forever. He'd come on the Stern Show, and I'd tell him 2 jokes, 5 jokes, 8 jokes. and blow his brains out every time. And then we wound up with the same act. He does a lot of the same. And you say, oh, you do Gilbert's jokes. I said, no, he's doing the jokes I told him over the years at the Stern Show, you know. They're not my jokes. They're just jokes.
Right.
You know?
They're just out there in the ether. Sam?
You guys are both politically incorrect, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And I also want to say, even if there is no big premiere because of COVID and all these restrictions, I still think the interest level in what you do is high. And I think that promoted virtually, you would still have a lot of traction, honestly.
Yeah, no,
I really do.
I think we'd get traction. I think we'd get a lot of questions and a lot of Q&A. But nothing is as much fun as standing in front of the crowd and taking live questions and being spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. You know, and that's just being selfish. We all know that it could be another year or two before we get out of this COVID thing. This could get much, much worse. I hope not. You know, and maybe all of a sudden the vaccines will do wonder, you know, but there's no way to know. But we got to get I told Ian, we got to get this thing out there. I don't want to be like, hey, here's the documentary we made about Jackie. It's a shame he's dead. He probably would have enjoyed it, you know.
Knock wood, that's not gonna happen.
It's so
This will
fun.
be my last question. What was your favorite live event you ever did?
My favorite live event, as far as Stern Show or me? Or...
Yeah, Stern Show and you, both.
You know, there's no answer to that. There really isn't. Everything was so much fun. I really loved headlining at the Riviera, but that was like, you know, that happened like 5 times. The night of the Private Parts premiere was huge. We didn't get to enjoy it. You know, we did the Private Parts premiere, and after the minute the minute the film was done, we had to go. Howard wanted to broadcast and tape the show for the next day because he couldn't wait 2 hours like a kid on Christmas. So we get done with the screening, and the whole world's partying their fucking asses off, and we're up there working. You know, I was so good with this stuff. Like 6 months after I was a comedian, I had my own album. I was ahead of the curve. I was the first. I was selling merch at the door as a comic before they had the term merch.
Yeah,
I was selling actual LPs that I produced myself and sell them at the door, and the guys would make fun of me. And then one day somebody said, "Wait a minute, he's walking out of here with an extra $50. He's not an idiot." You know what I mean? And I was ahead of the curve, and I was the first guy to have the internet. Oh God, you know,
I remember you had your website, and they would make fun of you.
Absolutely.
Part of my deal was Howard had to read my plugs when they came to our house, and they said, "You want to be on the World Wide Web?" And me and Nancy said, "Yeah, what the fuck is that?" And so they put us on the World Wide Web, and nobody knew what the fuck it was. And then it came time to read my plug, and Howard would go, "And if you want to see Jackie on the World Wide Web, go to http:// www.starbright.com/ and you could just feel how pissed off he was getting, and it was so great. But that was the very beginning, and they're like, "Oh, what an asshole! Look at Jackie's involved in another one of those flyaway things." And of course, 2 minutes later, you know.
Well, yes.
Mark Cuban owes me. Mark Cuban's in my documentary. You know, I did Mark Cuban a fucking favor way back when. You know, well, I got a crazy history. You know, Willie Nelson's in my documentary, and Penn Jillette, and you know, it's an interesting cast of characters, to say the least. You know.
I have one last favor to ask of you, and that's just to unblock me on Twitter. And you wouldn't know because I go under a different name under there. But
why would I have blocked? You must have said I
probably said something minutely negative about Stern, and you didn't. I'm sure you just don't want to entertain negativity at that time.
No. If it was how long ago?
Oh, years and years and years.
Oh yeah, because people thought that I was a clearinghouse to bitch about him, and I'm like, you know, this is not the Stern clearinghouse.
No.
Be glad to unhitch you. What's your name on there?
I'll have to get back to you on that one. I don't even remember because I barely log in. It's already logged in. You forget it's like forgetting you don't dial your own number. So what's my telephone number?
No, I know. All right.
Yeah.
Well, nothing
but,
personal. Nothing
no,
personal.
I'll message you. But the other thing was, I wanted to thank you so much.
I must have just sensed that you were an asshole.
You're partly right. I will say thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Next time we get together, I'll throw some Jackie Leonard stories at you, and you can throw me some. You can throw me some I'd love to talk Friars Club with you.
I don't know
Me
any
too.
Jackie Leonard stories, so I'd be all about hearing those. I'm reading the Hal Roach story right now, and I love all that old shit so much. So you obviously know who Cliff Nesteroff is, right?
I know the name, but I have to do my own homework on that a little bit.
If you haven't read Cliff Nesteroff's book, you're gonna email me a blowjob. I promise you. It's Cliff, Kliph.
Yep.
Nesteroff, and he does comedy, a collection of drunks, losers, thieves, and crooks, and it goes from vaudeville right up till present day, and it segues from person to person to person, and it's dirt, and it's good, and it's true, and it's crime. And this guy's like a 35-year-old guy from Canada that knows everything.
I think I might have seen it.
Fucking everything. I know this guy. Well, he's dead now, but I knew this guy from California that nobody knew. And he was an inside friend of mine, and he was friends with Lenny Bruce, and he managed Hunt's Hall, and he managed an all-girls orchestra, and he managed midgets, and he was on Ed Sullivan with a partner, and he had a comedy club in New Orleans with Shecky Green until they found a body in the green room. And nobody knew. And when I met Cliff Nesteroff, I said, listen, I got to tell you about Frankie Ray. And I go on his website. He's got he's got 3 interviews with Frankie Ray on there. I mean, this guy goes so deep and he's so interesting. Trust me, you'll get lost in it. We'll never see you again. You'll get lost in his website,
Fair enough.
Can I tell you, every time I hear a sad news story, if I plug in my head your laugh, I immediately just mentally plug in your laugh. It just makes my day. I'm like,
you know what's so great about that? What's so great about that is when I started doing comedy, there was an impressionist I worked with, and all the time he'd go, come on. Finally, one day I said, Woods, why do you keep saying come on? And he says, that's you. You say that all the time. And I said, you're out of your mind. And then it's like somebody who says, all the time,
Yeah.
And I listened. I said, holy Christ, I guess I say that. So then we're sitting on the air at some point, and Fred went, a couple times. I finally said, Fred, what is that fucking noise you're making? And he said, that's you. I said, you're out of your mind. And then I recorded myself at Jimmy's Comedy Alley like I always do. And on the way home, I'm listening to my tape. And it's not during a joke. It's like I told a joke, and I was like crossing the stage to take a pause before the next joke. And as I'm in between jokes, I said, why'd chicken cross the road? To get the other side. And it was right there in the middle of nowhere. And I isolated it, brought it in. I said, Fred, you're not crazy. Look, here it is. And I gave him the tape of Jimmy's Comedy Alley. And he proceeded to go in there and take every fucking noise that I ever made. And he started playing those noises. And it's so funny because people would yell at me for laughing at the nun getting hit by a bus, or else they congratulate me on how funny I was that I laughed about the nun getting hit by the bus. I'd say, I don't get any of the credit and I don't get any of the blame. It is all Fred. I can't even chime in on this. I'm besides the point,
Yeah.
I'm the paint. I didn't paint the house,
You're gonna laugh at this, Jackie, but believe it or not, last year there was at one point because we still cover the show, we do a breakdown of it every now and then. There was some story that was reported, and Fred did, for some reason, throw in one of your laughs, and they all started chuckling. And then Howard, I could tell, was pissed because he kept pressing it, and he said, "Oh, that's enough. That's enough of that." and it's not to make you feel bad; it's to make you feel, look, after all these years, if something's making you laugh, it's funny. And it doesn't stop being funny.
People tell me, some people say that that they still play my laugh a lot, and I'm like, send me a check.
Take it as
thank you.
I
don't know if you heard about this, but like in 2013, George Clooney went to the bank with 14 paper bags and told his bank to put $1 million cash in 14 different paper bags. And he went around and gave $1 million
to his buddies.
Everybody that was nice to him on his way up and along the way.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, you know, I hope Howard was listening. You know, I called up Richard Kind. I texted Richard Kind and said, Richard, I hope you were on that list. And he said, yeah, thank God. He said, I was going to miss a few meals, but luckily, you know, George showed up with $1 million. I'm like, you know, that's the kind of friends that, you know who Richard Kind is, right?
Of course,
sure you know who
of course.
Such a talented, delightful man, you know.
Brilliant.
And I'm just saying that so he'll share the $1 million, but I'm sure he spent it already, you know.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We love you, and we're sorry if we took up too much of your time. And
what the fuck am I going to do? I'll probably call you back.
You can call me anytime.
I got to make lunch for the wife. She's got to eat on a schedule, but I want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We love you.
All right. Samantha, send me Millard Fillmore's email address so I can write you guys together.
No, I just literally don't remember. I don't remember if it's at Jim Fix or at Fillmore Fingers.
I think Twitter. I'm talking about your email.
Okay.
Fillmore.
Oh, yeah.
I want to send you guys those chapters, and I want to send you the new pot song. You know about that, right? And I'm thinking about you and all that stuff. I'll send you some fun stuff.
Sure, sounds great.
You'll get a kick out of it.
Sam will hook you up with that. I really do got to let this go, but thank you so much once again.
All right, you kids. Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it.
Take care of yourself.
Jackie.
Stay safe.
Bye. Bye, honey.
Bye.
Gay baller, rock star, friends with Allison, oxycodone, off context, my child, through pills, social worker, CNN. Off context. Press release, Beverly Hills, lunch snack, diet.
I like you a lot.
Black eye at Wendy's.
Going, come on, you're great. This is great.
Linda Perry, Road Songs, Patty and Samantha, Women Give, Jessica Cincy, I'm happy.
ADT. Okay.
ADT.
There he is.
Divine bass players.